Just in July, a mountain shook 331 times. Almost every one of those tremors was tiny, but the one earthquake that didn't belong, that's the one we worry about. Most of these, over 300, were too weak to feel, too shallow to matter. Scientists had been watching this exact pattern for years already, for 7 years. And for 7 years, this has meant nothing. But one of them was different. And that's the one we need to talk about, definitely. Because this one earthquake came from somewhere entirely different. So 3 miles down in a place that the other earthquakes never touch. And where it came from is the reason that volcanologists and us here are now watching this mountain week by week. The mountain is called Mount Pelée. Maybe you know that monster. Last time it did something unexpected. That's why this is so dangerous. It ended over 30,000 people in less than it takes to boil a kettle of water, in less time. That's why this is so dangerous. So remember that one earthquake, the one that doesn't belong that I just mentioned. I'll come back to it.
The Caribbean region is prone to natural disasters. Jamaica and Haiti, among others, have had to deal with the impacts of such in recent years. Now, there is a close watch on the Mount Pelée volcano in Martinique. Romardo Lyons is in Martinique and now reports.
Home with a hazard in the backyard. The threat, a volcano with a last eruption in 1902, described as the worst volcanic disaster of the 20th century. It's the reality in Saint-Pierre, Martinique.
Mount Pelée sits on beautiful Martinique, Caribbean island that is roughly 1,500 miles southeast of Florida. So its deadliest eruption came in 1902 when a searing cloud of gas and debris swept through the town of Saint-Pierre and ended almost 30,000 lives in just minutes, not hours, minutes. Saint-Pierre was the cultural capital of the island, and I say was. And then it simply, guys, really, it simply wasn't there anymore. The eruption is considered the worst volcanic disaster of the 20th century. This is how bad it is. And here's the detail that basically explained to you what that cloud actually was. So out of a town of tens of thousands of people, only 3 people survived. Lutka Zulbaris was in a, we can say like a dungeon-like jail cell with almost no ventilation. Another one, Leon Compère Leon, he lived at the very edge of the city and escaped with severe burns. So a young girl, Havivra da Ilfril, she fled to a sea cave. These are the 3 stories. That's basically a stone cell, the outer edge, a cave. So that's the survival profile basically of something that doesn't only burn a town, it moves through it. It's raging through it. So if you were at that time outdoors, indoors, upstairs, downstairs, it did not make a difference. This is how cruel this was. The only thing that actually saved you was rock between you and the mountain. Rock. Keep that in mind. Mount Pelée is stirring again. What does that mean? It last erupted between 1929 and 1932, basically decades of quiet since then. But then this summer, the numbers moved. They started to move again between July 24th and July 31st, to be precise. So just right now, between that time frame, we could detect 124 earthquakes, 93 times the 45 recorded the week before. Nearly 3 times the amount of earthquakes that only just had been recorded the week before, 45. earthquakes in the week before that. So across all of July, the Martinique Volcanological and Seismological Observatory logged 331 volcanic earthquakes. That is average about 85 per week in July. But when it triples in a single week, like it did here, this is really a huge jump. That gets the scientists' attention and the local observatories' attention, of course, because these quakes, they can happen when basically, this is a volcano, magma or pressurized fluids fracture rock beneath the volcano. That is what's creating these earthquakes. So, of course, the seismic activity alone does not guarantee you an eruption. We know that. But when I mention this seismic activity, that is actually doing more work than you think, because when you look at what kind of earthquakes these were, it gets stranger by the minute. Very important. Almost all of these earthquakes were shallow. Almost all of the earthquakes in the last week of these 124 were shallow, between half a mile and just over a mile below the summit. So very, very shallow in the summit area of the volcano. So none of them exceeded magnitude 1. Of course, then too small to be felt on the surface at all. But that doesn't make them insignificant. And they have a known cause for these earthquakes. These tremors are linked to a network of superheated water and steam that has fueled the unrest at Pelée since 2019. So, okay, good. That's water, not magma. Nothing to see here, we can go. Nope, not that fast. Of course, this is the hydrothermal system of a volcano that is basically doing what it's been doing for 7 years, but noisier this month, right? If the story ended here, this would be a non-story. But since I'm making a video about it, you can guess it's not ending here. One earthquake did not fit, remember? A single quake struck roughly miles below sea level, just west of these summit domes of Mount Pelée. So this is a critical zone between the hydrothermal system and the magma reservoir. And if you hear magma reservoir, now you know why this earthquake is something that we should have a closer look. This is the area where we basically have hot fluids and gases that can migrate between these two areas, the magma and the hydrothermal system. 3 miles down, when everything else was 1 mile down. So that's a huge difference. And especially if that difference appears in that corridor that connects the steam that we have above to the magma below. That's that one earthquake. That's the one that matters. And this is the reason that these 331 tremors is the wrong number to look at. Don't look at them. There's a second signal, and that is independent of the earthquakes. Since May, the scientists have detected several inches of ground movement around Pelée's summit. The land is rising, something's blowing up. So if we have the earthquake and the land rise below the summit, right? This is closely shifting at close to half an inch per month. You might say that's not much, but guys, something is blowing up a balloon underneath the surface and it's stretching the land above it. So the deformation is consistent with a pressurized source at about 0.6 miles beneath the summit that is causing that volcano, that dangerous volcano, to swell from within. So basically what we can say, that mountain is getting bigger, measurably getting bigger. And here's the twist. That movement has actually slowed down slightly during the latest 4-week period. So is this now good or bad? Yes, when scientists see that in their report, they see that slowdown as a positive sign. But they say several more weeks of observation are needed to determine whether the pressure beneath the volcano is genuinely subsiding, or is this the calm before the storm. So right now you have two signals pointing in opposite direction. Seismicity is tripling right now. The deformation is easing. So nobody currently, I have to say currently, nobody knows which signal is basically telling the truth at this dangerous volcano. I don't want to be dramatic, but this is exactly the reason why the local observatory has said we need data of several more weeks. We need to see what is it doing. But let's be clear what is, and what isn't being claimed. So officials have not issued any warning of an imminent eruption, and Florida is not considered to be under direct threat from that. I want to make that sure. There's no evacuation, there's no alarm right now. That's the real picture that we have there right now. What the observatory is preparing for is the scenario that if this does indeed continue, because a major eruption could send very, very disturbing, destructive, and ending clouds of gas, ash, and rock across northern Martinique, and also disrupt Caribbean air travel. I'm not so worried about the air travel, but about what's coming across the island. So, of course, Martinique sits along busy air corridors that are basically linking the region to the United States. So, of course, this would be a major disruption, right? And probably it's the reason if this mountain ends up in the headlines. Most people have never heard of that mountain, and it's 1,500 miles away from Florida. But it ends in the headlines because they're worried about the air travel. But where does that all leave us with this volcano? A volcano that has been quiet since 1932. We have 7 years of unrest. Now we can say probably low-level unrest that meant nothing, but now we have a month where all of a sudden the tremor count has tripled. All of it shallow but one. So shallow ones, probably water, all of them too small to feel, but one earthquake 3 miles down, we can say in exactly the wrong place, exactly where you do not want to have it. Of course, it's a single event. It doesn't prove anything. It might be nothing. It might be nothing. Most of them are nothing when it comes to volcanoes, but it only needs one that is something, and poof, shizzy's hitting the fizzy. Because this is the only earthquake of the 331 that came from down there from the corridor between the steam and the magma. And I guess really when they say they need more data in the next few weeks, yeah, that will tell us if we need to prepare for something. Of course, I will watch this for you. I will watch their bulletins. I will see what's going on with the volcano, but it's definitely something that I thought you would have to know. Because if that deep signal repeats again, you will hear me. That's for sure. And if you want to do what's happening at Yellowstone, they got it wrong, completely wrong. They have to basically redo the whole system about the likelihood of a major eruption at Yellowstone and what is actually happening, or what is Yellowstone. This is mind-baffling. Watch it here. Bye-bye.